Welcome to the Midnight Files channel. Imagine an object so powerful that kings have waged wars for it, knights have died seeking it, and treasure hunters have searched for centuries trying to find it. An artifact that appears in more legends, books, and films than perhaps any other object in Western civilization. The Holy Grail has captivated human imagination for over 800 years. But here's the remarkable truth: this legendary object started its life in literature, not as a holy relic at all, but as a simple serving dish at a mysterious feast. This is the story of how a humble platter became the world's most sought-after treasure. The story of the Holy Grail begins not in ancient Jerusalem, but in medieval France in the late 12th century. Around 1180 to 1191, a French poet named Chrétien de Troyes was writing what would become one of the most influential works in Western literature. His patron was Count Philip of Flanders, powerful nobleman who, according to Chrétien, gave him a source book to work from. Chrétien called his work Perceval, the story of the Grail. In this poem, a young knight named Perceval visits the castle of the mysterious Fisher King. While dining there, Perceval witnesses a strange procession. First comes a young man carrying a bleeding lance, then two boys carrying candelabras. Finally, a beautiful young woman emerges, carrying an elaborately decorated object that Chrétien calls un graal. The word graal comes from Old French and Latin, meaning simply a wide dish or serving platter brought to the table during a meal. Here's what's fascinating: Chrétien never calls this object holy. He never connects it to Jesus Christ, the Last Supper, or Christianity at all. It's simply described as a golden dish set with blazing jewels so radiant that it makes the candlelight in the room seem dim by comparison. Chrétien mentioned later in the poem that this graal contains a holy wafer, an oblique reference to the Mass, but he provides no explanation of what the object actually is or why it matters. Perceval, who had been warned not to talk too much, remains silent during this mysterious procession. He asks no questions. When he wakes up the next morning, the castle is empty and everyone has vanished. Perceval later learns that his failure to ask about what he witnessed was a terrible mistake, but Chrétien never completed his poem. He died before finishing the story, leaving readers with an eternal mystery. What was the Grail, and what did it all mean? This unfinished quality proved to be literary gold. Over the next half-century, 4 different poets wrote continuations attempting to finish Chrétien's story. The mysterious Grail had captured medieval imagination, but it was still just a serving dish, a wondrous object certainly, but not yet holy in the Christian sense. The transformation came from another French poet writing in the 1190s. His name was Robert de Boron, and he would change everything. Writing between 1191 and 1202, Robert created a work called Joseph of Arimathea. In this poem, Robert took Chrétien's mysterious Graal and gave it an explicit Christian history. According to Robert, the Grail was the vessel used by Jesus Christ at the Last Supper. After the crucifixion, Joseph of Arimathea, the man who provided the tomb for Jesus' body, used this same vessel to collect drops of Christ's blood as he hung on the cross. Joseph was then imprisoned, but Christ appeared to him in a vision and explained the mysteries of this blessed cup. Upon his release, Joseph and his followers traveled west to Britain, bringing the Grail with them, where it was guarded by a dynasty of keepers that would eventually include Perceval. This was revolutionary. Robert had taken a serving dish from a French romance and transformed it into one of Christianity's most sacred relics. The Grail was now the Holy Grail, forever linked to the blood of Christ and the Last Supper. Robert's work became the foundation for what came next: the massive Vulgate Cycle, also called the Lancelot Grail, written between 1215 and 1235. This enormous collection of French prose romances told the complete story of King Arthur, from the history of the Grail through the fall of Camelot. The Vulgate Cycle introduced a new Grail, hero Galahad, the pure and sinless son of Lancelot. In these stories, the Grail quest becomes a spiritual journey. 150 knights of the Round Table set out to find it, but most fail because of their moral flaws. Lancelot, despite being the greatest knight in the world, cannot achieve the Grail because of his adulterous love for Queen Guinevere. Gawain fails because of his violent temper and worldly nature. Only 3 knights witness the Grail: Galahad, Perceval, and Bors. Galahad, because of his perfect purity and sinlessness, is allowed to look directly into the Grail and see its ultimate mysteries. He then ascends to heaven, and the Grail disappears from the world forever. The legend reached its most famous form in English through Sir Thomas Malory. Malory was a knight who wrote while imprisoned, completing his masterwork between 1469 and 1470. His book, which he titled The Whole Book of King Arthur and of his Noble Knights of the Round Table, was published in 1485 by William Caxton, England's first printer. Caxton mistakenly used the title of the final chapter, La Morte d'Arthur, meaning the death of Arthur, as the title for the entire work, and the name stuck. Malory drew heavily from the French Vulgate Cycle. His version of the Grail quest focuses on Galahad as the destined Grail Knight, with Perceval and Bors as his companions. Malory's work would become the primary source for almost all later Arthurian literature in English, making his version of the Grail story the one most familiar to modern readers. But all of this was literature, stories told by medieval poets. Were there actual physical objects claimed to be the Holy Grail? The answer is yes, and the most famous is in Valencia, Spain. The Holy Chalice of Valencia is an agate cup that has been venerated for centuries as potentially being the actual vessel used by Jesus at the Last Supper. The cup itself, just the upper bowl portion, is made of dark red agate. Archaeological analysis dates this agate cup to the Hellenistic period, specifically between the 2nd century BC and the 1st. This means it's exactly the right age and type to have been used in 1st century Jerusalem. The first documented historical reference to this specific chalice appears in 1134 in an inventory of the treasury at the monastery of San Juan de la Peña in Aragon. The inventory describes it as the vessel in which Christ consecrated his blood. In 1399, the monks gave the chalice to King Martin V of Aragon in exchange for a gold cup. King Martin kept it in Zaragoza, and in 1411 his successor, King Alfonso V, transferred it to Valencia, where it was eventually placed in Valencia Cathedral. The Valencia chalice has been there for over 500 years. It has never been officially authenticated by the Catholic Church as the true Last Supper cup, but it has been honored by popes. Pope John Paul II celebrated Mass with it in 1982. Pope Benedict XVI used it in 2006, calling it this most famous chalice. The Vatican has granted Valencia Cathedral special permission to hold a Holy Year celebration every 5 years because of the chalice's significance. Is it real? The cup itself is genuinely ancient, dating to the right period and manufactured in a style consistent with expensive vessels from the Eastern Mediterranean. The tradition connecting it to the Last Supper is old but not traceable beyond the early medieval period. Most historians believe we simply cannot know for certain. Other objects have been claimed as the Grail over the centuries. The Sacro Catino in Genoa Cathedral, a hexagonal green glass dish, was once thought to be emerald and was claimed as the Grail. When Napoleon seized it in 1805, it was discovered to be glass, not emerald. Modern analysis dates it to the 9th or 10th century, far too late to be from Jesus' time. Glastonbury in England became associated with the Grail legend in the 13th century, when stories emerged claiming that Joseph of Arimathea had brought the Grail to Britain and founded Glastonbury Abbey. These legends grew more elaborate over time, though early accounts focused more on Joseph as the evangelist of Britain rather than as the custodian of the Grail. In the early 20th century, a glass bowl was deliberately hidden near Glastonbury by a man named John Goodchild and later discovered by his friends in 1906, who promoted it as the Holy Grail. This was a modern creation, not an ancient relic. The truth is that the Grail legend and claims about actual Last Supper vessels developed on separate tracks. Medieval relic veneration focused much more on items like fragments of the true cross and the Holy Lance than on chalices. Despite all the literature about the Grail, traditions about an actual Last Supper cup remained remarkably rare compared to other relics associated with Jesus. So what is the Holy Grail really? Is it a cup, a dish, a stone? Is it in Valencia, buried in some forgotten cave, or lost forever? The answer depends on how you look at it. From a historical perspective, the Holy Grail began as a literary device, a mysterious object in an unfinished French poem. Over the course of a few decades in the late 12th and early 13th centuries, medieval writers transformed it into the most sacred Christian relic imaginable, a vessel that touched the lips of Christ and caught his blood. The Grail became powerful not because of what it was, but because of what it represented. It symbolized divine grace, spiritual perfection, and the ultimate goal of the Christian quest for salvation. The very fact that it was unattainable by all but the purest souls made it all the more compelling. Lancelot, the greatest knight in the world, could not achieve it because of his human weaknesses. Gawain could not find it because of his violent nature. Only Galahad, described as perfect and sinless, could look upon it. This is why the Grail has endured. It's not just about a cup, it's about the quest itself, the journey towards something greater than ourselves, the search for meaning and grace in an imperfect world. The legend has inspired countless works of art, literature, music, and film, from medieval manuscripts to T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland to Monty Python's Monty Python and the Holy Grail to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The Grail continues to capture imagination. Modern treasure hunters still search for it. Historians still debate the Valencia Chalice. New theories emerge regularly, and perhaps that's exactly as it should be. The Grail's power has always been in its mystery, in being just beyond reach. Chrétien de Troyes left his poem unfinished, and in a sense, the quest for the Grail itself remains unfinished. Each generation reimagines it, searches for, and finds new meaning in the legend. Whether the Holy Grail was ever a physical object, whether it exists today in some cathedral or hidden vault, or whether it was always meant to be something beyond the material world, the search continues. And as long as humans seek meaning, grace, and perfection, the quest for the Holy Grail will never truly end. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.